Hello guys, and today I am very happy to welcome Professor Gerdes on the channel because we are going to speak about one very important topic, and that is language and language of war. And also because on his channel, Professor managed to create a unique learning atmosphere where people actually take a lot from each other and make pro-Ukrainian community stronger. Welcome to the channel, Professor.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
We've recently visited your channel with Operator Starsky, and we started talking about the language and how it influences people's thoughts and opinions.
The special military operation language as opposed to war. You can't say war. People have gone to jail for holding up a blank sign, right? I mean, there's a reason no rational person would be afraid of a blank sign. But they're afraid of it because they understand the power that words have and that language has. And if you, and so they have to clamp down on these kind of things so that it doesn't get out of control because they have to control the narrative.
And they do it really well if we talk about Russia, because unfortunately they had experience for, we may say, 100 years, because somehow with all the transformations, the Russian imperial character survived back from the Tsar Russian Empire to the Soviet Union and now to the so-called Russian Federation. And they are indeed substituting terms and ideas in the very talented way, we may say, because it definitely demands a lot of effort to be able to brainwash that many people. And maybe we will touch upon some phrases that they've introduced later. But with Russia, it's obvious. They want to manipulate the world. They want to break the support that we have between other states. But how do you think why other countries that potentially see evil coming from Russia are so, I may say, not sensitive to language, but are afraid of using some terms, even war, in the context of Russian aggression to Ukraine? Why is it still...
You know, if you're familiar with Darth Putin, the parody website, he does such a fantastic job of using language to just hit you between the eyes with his comments. And he said, well, you know, we call this a hybrid operation because if we called this a war, you'd have to do something about it, or an attack, you'd have to do something about it. That's right. I think that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that they're going to actually have to do something in many cases rather than just go, well, you know, strong words. This is what we hear all the time from, we're very concerned, says Jake Sullivan. And I mean, there's a level of not wanting to get involved, but wanting to be on the right side of things that I think you see from certain countries. And the closer that you are to Ukraine, the more that that changes, right? So I've been to post-Soviet states from 2001 forward. I've been to Lithuania, Belarus, right? Romania and Bulgaria. And they think differently in Lithuania than they do in Germany, or they do in England, or they do, right? I mean, like England has been a stalwart friend, no question. But the further you get away, it's just different than when you're right up on the border. Landsbergis, the foreign secretary, was just talking about, like, look, this was yesterday, he came out and said, we had 50 years from the time they stopped firing, but we weren't free. And so people that have experienced that Soviet aggression over time understand that, you know, this is the same song, second verse. And they don't want it. They're rejecting it. Like, and the euphemisms, going back to what we were just talking about, do you feel more liberated now than you did before? I'm pretty sure you don't, right? I mean, but that's the language that they use. They're coming to liberate you. They're not attacking you. That's shameful and mean. They're coming to liberate and save people from, you know, and to denazify you, to keep you from being under those oppressive Nazis that, like in World War II, if you asked the Germans, where are the Nazis? They would have been like, hey, I'm right here, right? If you did that now, who's saying that? Like that's really the trick here, because they're making stuff up, but because they control the narrative, they get to say it and say it and say it and say it, and then it'll be repeated in their propaganda in RT, and then you'll see in African. I've done this before with RT. I've cut and paste the entire RT article, and then I put it into a Google search, and lo and behold, it shows up in African something and Asian something else, and like just like lazy journalism, but spreading RT's message. It's fascinating to watch.
Yes, and whenever people speak about the second strongest army in the world, I may agree if we're talking about Russian informational warfare.
Oh wow.
What what I love recently, Putin also expressed concerns
Mm,
about the inability to support Bashar Assad's regime in Syria. So we all know that by expressing concerns, you actually do nothing.
mm-hmm.
But indeed, it's not just about the choice of words with which we describe these harsh realities, but also the things that we highlight with our messages. And,
Mm-hmm.
on my channel, I repeatedly speak about the achievements of the Ukrainian army because there are a lot. And many of the global media, they keep focusing, if there are no Russian success, then on the fear of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this like kind of twist on your side, like that the focus is always, if we're talking about problems, it's on Ukraine, it's happening in Ukraine war. But if we
Yeah.
are talking about like dangers, it's about consider how big Russia is, Russian nuclear weapons, we cannot survive without Russia, we are afraid of the Russian dissolution. Do you think these are ideas that are genuinely like come from Western governments and people, or they were brought by more advanced technologies than RT working inside of our societies?
Um, I think it's like what the devil does. I know that sounds weird to say, but so in a Christian theological kind of view, the devil's going to take your natural impulses and twist them away from what you're designed to do. And that's what Russia is doing there. So you already have kind of a fear of a natural fear of, well, what if things go wrong in the world? And then the Russian propaganda machine twists that, amplifies it, and says World War III is going to come. If this happens, we're going to get blown up. We're going to, right? So they take what's already kind of lying dormant, that you're not thinking about being blown up in World War III, and they play on a natural thing that's already there, but not really. It's just lying dormant, and so they'll play it up from RT, but RT only gets so much press. But then they'll play it up through Scott Ritter and Doug McGregor and Tucker Carlson and all these amplifiers who will then repeat these kinds of things. And when they do that, then it gets out into, and so people that are low information just hear these things and start worrying about what's happening, where it's not really the same kind of threat that they would think it is, but Russia needs it to sound like a threat. The most fascinating thing that I saw in the last few days was this article about how Gerasimov is telling our chief joint chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff about how, this was pre-planned, the intercontinental missile. This was well, you just spent a week telling us this was retaliatory. And because it didn't
Mm-hmm.
have that effect, now you're going to say it was pre-planned? Come on. I mean, but so when they lie so much, you can't believe them about anything. See, that's the thing. Like, people will be like, well, you only tell this side of the story about how many casualties, Gerdes. Why don't you tell the other side? Well, I try to, but the other side lies so much. It's really hard. I have to triangulate on, here's what the Economist says, and here's what the British say, and here's what the Americans, I'd like to, in order to try to get a sense of what the actual casualty rates are. Because the Russians just lie. Sure, it's always 5-1 or 8-1 Russia, one Russian for uh, every 8 Ukrainians that die. Sure, it is. No, they just lie and lie and lie, and then you can't believe anything that they say.
But unfortunately, many still believe what they say. And
Yep.
this kind of hurts me as a Ukrainian, that there are so many Russian fakes that after 3 years of very violent war online that you can literally see, people still want to find some excuses, and they dig deep into like this Russian stories, forgetting about this like very vivid things. You don't need to go that deep. Simply look at what they do on a daily basis in Ukraine. Would like to ask you what words that are used to describe Russian war in Ukraine or are connected with that maybe irritate you as a person who stands for democracy and who like sees the reality. To make it easier, I will start maybe with the escalation and escalation management because we've never heard that coming out of Putin's mouth before it was introduced by our
Mhm.
Western allies. And I
Yeah.
clearly observed how Russian propaganda caught this idea and started using it like, thank you, wow, a great idea, let's use it. And I think it's quite obvious that all, like, one of the main reasons why this war lasts so long for Ukrainian people is because all the steps of our army and of our partners, they are reactive. Like, we wait what Russia does and then we respond. And it's never that Russia is waiting, what will happen? What will they
Yeah.
do? Because in war, you need this kind of unpredictability and dynamics. What terms irritate you or you think they are actually bad for the
So
global understanding?
So rather than specific terms, let me talk about it in a broad brushstroke,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we've been deterred. And deterrence is supposed to work where, look, we have this huge arsenal and you better not do this or else but we couldn't use that arsenal of nuclear weapons in Afghanistan or Iraq, right? We knew that. Everybody knew that. But Putin has kind of flipped the switch here where, he just keeps nuclear saber rattling. And in doing that, Biden has been deterred. I'm not picking at Biden. I'm just saying, like, he has this knee jerk reaction to not escalating. And then Jake Sullivan only amplifies that knee jerk reaction to not escalating. And then Putin seizes on that and goes, you know what? Let's just crank out more of this message. And that, to the people while saying this can't happen. Right. What just happened with the Belarus yesterday? It's more of the same stuff. Now, nothing materially changed with Belarus with nuclear weapons. What did change yesterday was that you have almost a phase 2 of that North Korea, Russia joint agreement that if you're attacked or I'm attacked, it's almost like that kind of thing happened, and that's not good at all. But as far as the nuclear part goes, nothing changed. What, like, but they keep amplifying it and amplifying and amplifying. And if you hear who's talking about World War III, it's not America or the West ever saying, well, we can't wait to start World War III. It's like the Soviet
It is.
it kind of is. It's the Russian propaganda channels talking about it all the time. Look, when I talk to my friends, even if they're on a different page, and well, I don't want World War III, and then they explain why they, don't provoke Putin. Well, I don't want World War III, and then this is why you need to push back against Putin, so you don't. But none of us are saying, yeah, let's start World War III. That's a great idea, right? Like, nobody is saying that message except the Russians on their propaganda channel saying, let's hit London, let's hit, right? I mean, that's where, so it's odd, just the way that we're talking about it. I give this example sometimes. And okay, so let's say you have a hand grenade, okay? Now, that's pretty powerful. Like, that's a big thing. But if you have a hand grenade on your person and you walk into a bar and you get into a fight, it's a small bar, like a small enclosed room. You can't use that hand grenade. It'll blow you up too. So it doesn't matter how tough you are. You can't use it. You have to conventionally fight with your fists or maybe a bottle or something like that. That's where the Russians are. Right? They have these things, but they can't use it. If using it is going to be so toxic to them, it'll kill them at the same time. So they know that they have to, but they're not very good at conventional fighting. Like, the average lifespan of your contract soldier going to the front line is less than a month. I saw a figure of 12 to 18 days yesterday. I mean, it's bad for them. So but they keep using it as if the hand grenade is like, you better stay back. I have this hand grenade. It, so, but they're deterring at the same. So they're actually winning at that in some way. Like when you're saying the second strongest army is actually the Russian propaganda machine, you might be right about that. I mean, they are very effective in that sort of thing, and that's unfortunate. Humanitarian corridors. This is a humanitarian corridor is where you abduct Ukrainian children and send them to
Mhm.
Russia. That's what a humanitarian corridor is. We got to stop using their language to and describe it the proper. Like you said this the other day when we were on with Starsky about how no, this is not the Ukraine war. This is the Russia, Iran,
North
China,
Korea.
North Korea war. Holy cow, that's exactly right. Maybe even Syria, but for now.
Yeah, you're right.
So,
And it's just like they keep repeating, for example, Minsk agreement, right? And most of the tragic events of this before the full-scale invasion after 2014, they took place after Minsk agreements were signed, like literally on the next days when were they creating green corridors for Ukrainian soldiers and killing in Ilovaisko, the Beltsevo. And it is actually awful how then they later use it like, oh, Ukrainians, you don't want peace, meaning that this peace is capitulation, surrender,
mhm,
torture of people, I don't know, conscription them to Russian army and moving westwards.
mhm,
And yesterday was quite difficult to watch Carlson interview with Lavrov, where Lavrov
mhm,
promised security guarantees to Ukraine on the day when they actually targeted Zaporizhia and killed nine civilians. And I feel a little bit worried that after these 3 years of very obvious war crimes, we return back to these discussions like let's not escalate, let's not provoke. You had this very beautiful example of a man coming into a bar with a grenade in his hand.
mhm,
And I can continue it that imagine you have this man in your neighborhood walking with a grenade and threatening all neighbors
mhm.
around. Do you think that the best strategy is to keep hiding in your houses whenever he is on the street? I don't know, instruct your children not to speak to him and keep hiding, not to provoke him. Or maybe it's better to call the police or I don't know, the hospital
Yeah,
and do something to this man. Because right
yeah.
now, people choose hiding in their flats.
It's like I don't know how your family gatherings are, but at Thanksgiving or Christmas, like almost every family has their crazy uncle that everybody knows. Like, Uncle Tommy, he's not quite right upstairs, and Uncle Tommy's the only one who's not aware of that. And everybody else kind of tap dances around him. That's what's going on in this whole neighborhood within the world. Right? Everybody knows. Like nobody is worried about the Lithuanians invading anyone, right?
Or
Maybe in the 14th
Ukrainians.
century. Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying? Like everybody's like, it's the Russians. Nobody's like, you know what? Those Swedes, they may be coming for you. They're not doing that. Like again, this might have been centuries ago. Everyone right now knows that it's crazy Uncle Tommy. That's the Russians right now. And so Georgia knows it, and Romania knows it, and the Moldovans know it. Ukraine knows it, like everybody knows it. The alliance is to prevent them from doing stuff. The NATO alliance is to prevent so and like even NATO is going, we can't do anything because what if we trigger Article 5? Your whole purpose was to be there to prevent Russia from continuing, Russia as the Soviet Union then, to prevent them from continuing to move forward, which they're now moving forward. So help the people that they're moving forward against, prevent that. So at any rate, yes, but let's talk about like what they're doing in other nations, like Romania, for example.
Yes, and one interesting conclusion that I have come up with recently is that people are so distracted and terrified of the potential nuclear strike from Russia, and that was Oreshnik task actually, and they do not notice that real hybrid war is
Hmm.
already happening, and this real Russian war against your countries it will not take the form of nuclear. Putin is not suicidal. He distracts you so that you are afraid of these nuclear strikes when most of Russian children, of Russian politicians live next to you, so they won't nuke their own children. Let's be realistic. Lavrov's daughters and so on, and Putin's daughters. But you do not notice bad things happening, like this Romanian case with TikTokers, like Georgia, when they simply freeze the decision of people to join the European Union and say, no, we want it the other way. And there are various things, starting from killing citizens, let's say, of the United Kingdom, in the United Kingdom with Russian special services, like, and everybody knows. People saw Litvinenko dying online after poisoning, speaking for
Mhm.
Putin's actions in Beslan and so on. And nothing happens. And that's how they distract you with this language, with these threats from real things that are already spoiling your lives.
Yeah.
Social media. Social media now, we've met because of social media. YouTube is a social media to a great extent.
Mhm.
And there are some great things that it does, connecting people, helping them defend their democracy, getting drones for the Ukrainian armed forces. But there are also awful things. How do you think? What's the future of social media, political life? Will they keep spoiling it? Will they separate at a certain moment? What dangers does that impose and what benefits?
Yeah, I want to draw an analogy. So the game changer in the war, the hot war, I'm sorry, special military operation. I don't want to go to jail, right? In Ukraine has been, I mean, the Russian, Iranian, Chinese, uh, right? The game changer has been drones, right? I mean, like without drones, the Ukrainian army would have had a really hard time with shell deprivation, being able to attack artillery, and they really reduced the threat by using drones to pinpoint. Okay, so drones have been the game changer. Like last night, the drones that attacked out in the sea last night, right? Okay, so cyber drones. That's what's happening with TikTok in Romania. I mean, that's essentially the same. It's the same
Cyber
stuff, right?
drones. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's what bots are. They're cyber drones. It's not real people. It's, you like that word? You can use it. Feel free. So the idea is that they're using these new technologies in such a way as to attack with this hybrid warfare in order to get to fight a political battle that's getting him what he hasn't gotten or wouldn't have been able to accomplish in, let's say, Romania with some kind of hot war, which is what's going on the ground in Ukraine. Um, and so that's Romania, 66,000 fake accounts, right? Now, there were some of these accounts. This is a scary thing. Some of these accounts actually predate before China released TikTok to the world. So some of them, yeah, so some of them are Chinese. Yeah, wrap that around your mind. That's scary. Okay, so and then you look at like what's going on in Georgia, and Georgia just does now. Okay, I learned about I lived through the time where the Maidan happened, but I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I should have been paying attention, but you were paying attention, I'm sure. And if you're looking at this, doesn't this look eerily like the Maidan? I mean, like almost the same circumstances. No, we're not going to go to Europe, and
Mm-hmm.
now the government's being way heavy-handed. And tell me about that. Like, it's like same song, second verse, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why there are lots of Twitter cyber drones telling about coup in Ukraine in 2014. And I have this one very beautiful argument for those who doubt. Do you know that, like, President Yanukovych, the Minister of Internal Affairs responsible for the special military services police at that time, Minister of Education, General Prosecutor, fled to Russia and got Russian citizenship in the
Mm-hmm.
very same day. So if you're talking about a coup, this was a Russian coup then, because all of
Yeah.
these guys escaped and remain in Russia. And actually the Minister of Education of Ukraine, who did lots of bad things for the history of Ukraine, the way it studied at school. He wanted to like unite it with global history and so on. And now he is a deputy of Единая Россия, Putin's party, and he is a member of the Russian parliament. Why don't you think about that when you speak about like coups and other stuff? And yeah,
So
you're right.
that just triggered a thought. Do you speak Russian?
I do.
Okay, so there's a reason that the Russians are coming in. It's to protect you.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's why I speak very slow Russian, you know. And you know, many people try to demonstrate it like, you see, you speak Russian, so that's your brotherly nation. I was born before the collapse of the USSR, and it was really difficult not to know Russian. So it's not my like choice, and
Mm-hmm.
people forget about that, and they say you're bilingual. It's not because my family was bilingual. It's because a majority of information, like school books, like something, they were back either from the Soviet times, and they never wanted to let us go. That's why they tried to introduce during Yanukovych time, for example. There were lots of joint New Year concerts that resembled the Soviet style, where you would always have a Russian host and like a Russian series, and you did not have access to Ukrainian or something. So it's not by choice,
Mm-hmm.
it's by no other options that people could like learn this language.
So we were talking about the Maidan equivalent, and it struck me that you used the word coup, and it struck me that what the Georgians actually did by having the fake election where we could see them stuffing ballots. I mean, like we have videos of those sort of things was actually a coup, but then they'll blame the people out in the streets protesting now as being the coup. And so this is what I observe quite a bit with Russian propaganda is that they do this weird mirroring effect. Whatever they're doing, they're blaming you about.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's just something that you pick up if you watch enough of it. You're like, wow. So they were just doing this, but they're saying the Americans are doing that, or they're saying that it's the British, or they're saying that the Ukrainians are, or they're saying NATO is doing. But this is what they were just doing.
And you know, Professor, one thing that we should remind viewers in the United States specifically, because some of them get under this impression that maybe it was USA or CIA interference or something like that. Russian propaganda does not use this myth or narrative to target Ukrainians. So it was
Mm,
never like for us, it does not work in Ukrainian society. And you know why? Because we have history, we know our history, we know that our history
mhm,
and wars with Russia and Russian suppression and genocide against Ukrainians last kind of for 3 centuries at least, long before the United States were like strong enough to participate in any like military operations abroad. We suffered when you were still fighting for your independence.
mhm.
We experienced Holodomor long before NATO was shaped. So you cannot actually drop this kind of propaganda bomb in Ukraine because no one will believe that it was organized by someone else. There are more than enough reasons for us to protest against Russia and joining Ruski Mir.
Mm.
We don't need like any foreign interference in this
So,
case.
but the combat mosquitoes and biolabs, those are new, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, you know, the one thing that I have, the one question that I have to those who believe it, why on earth we don't use them? If we have that many things, why don't we use that?
No, that's right. I mean, if you do have combat mosquitoes, you think you'd be
Why?
employing them right now.
Why are we hiding them? Perhaps it's like the U.S.
That is the
administration,
greatest answer.
we have a ban on using long-range mosquitoes.
Yeah. That's the greatest answer to that question. Well, it's just hidden. It's a conspiracy. That's why you don't see it. Well, that is
And
a good
it's
question.
Yeah, and people, there are so many things that you see. You see Russians destroying a cancer hospital in the center of Kiev. And it's not just the tragedy of that day. It's a tragedy for years because this was the
Hmm.
place where children from different locations in Ukraine would come to get very specific treatment they cannot get in their cities.
Hmm.
And by destroying it, they actually prevent lots of kids coming there in months until it is like repaired or reconstructed.
Yeah.
You see it, but you prefer, I don't mean you, neutral, this you prefers to not see it and instead look for there must be a reason why Russia did it. There must be something. You see facts, you see photos, you see these poor kids with chemotherapy medications outside, and you still look for something.
And the world collectively yawns, and this is a tragedy to me. Let's go back to crazy Uncle Tommy, right? If he's crazy enough, over time, people just start to discount him. And same kind of thing is happening here with the Russian, Iranian, Chinese, North Korean, potentially Syrian war on Ukraine. It's the same dynamic where they just bombed another hospital. Oh yeah, those Russians. That's how they like you start discounting it where you shouldn't, because you should be like thinking like this is a war crime. This is tragic. The world should be up in arms. But after enough incidents of the same kind of thing happening again, it's the shock value just dissipates, and that's really a great tragedy.
And imagine how painful it is for us Ukrainians, because not only you witness that on a daily basis, not only you can get killed literally every minute just because you are Ukrainian, but you have to keep persuading the world that it's not good to erase your nation at such pace. Like, no, it's not right, guys, still. Like, and it's kind of bad. And maybe to sum up it in a useful way for me personally and for some of our viewers from Ukraine, how do you think, what messages we need to send to the world, to the people of the United States, maybe more actively, to remind them about this need? And here, once again, I want to say not that much to support Ukraine, because they are tired of Ukraine, when in reality the problem is Russia.
Yeah.
Defeat Russia. Rising prices, problems, dangers of the World War III and so on. It's not Ukraine. It's Russia. Yeah. So what messages people in the US lack from our side? How do you think? When you speak to your friends who are on the other page, what are these main misunderstandings, misconceptions that we can try to correct?
Right. Yeah. I try to unmask what Russia really is. And I think that's really the focus. So one of my videos, I was talking about how I was showing Solyov. I said, like, this is the one video you need to see. So Solyov is talking about how essentially Ukrainians are not actually Ukrainians. There are people that call themselves Ukrainian, but they're really Russians who are traitors against Russia. So they either need to come back to Russia or be just totally destroyed and wiped out. That's how they think. And if you understand that that's how they think, then you have great clarity about what you need to do in order to support Ukraine, because this is like, that's not okay. And they're going to keep coming. But as long as we're talking about, well, what about the biolabs, or what about the this or the that, or the nuclear weapon, or what, it's all peripheral distraction. You have to understand that this is how Russians think, and they're going to keep coming and keep doing this kind of thing. And even if you give them a brief pause, we'll declare a peace in our time, and then we're not going to have it 5 years, 10 years later, because they're going to keep coming back. Because as long as they still believe that that's what Ukrainians actually are, they're just treasonous Russians who need to be destroyed or brought back into the fold because they've decided that Russia is dreamy again. Until you get to that place, nothing will change. And so we have to focus on the thing that we have to focus on, and not all the peripherals.
Thank you so much. That is indeed a good advice. And thank you so much for being a strong voice in the support of Ukraine against Russia, North Korea, China, Iran. And these are your enemies
Maybe
too.
Syria.
That's why, maybe Syria. That's why we need to remain united. Thank you so much for joining the channel, and thank you for everything that you do.
Thanks for having me.
And now I will stop recording.